So getting back to some inking here, and gonna start inking the figures. The last video prior to this video here for this page, I did all the backgrounds, and gonna start here with BALDOR down here in the corner. Kind of approaching it still from that perspective of working with the furthest elements. So in this case, Casia is clearly in the foreground, but you've got three characters here who are still more like in the midground, I guess, compared to the background. So, or middle ground. So we're going to work on this here, this character. Going to get my brush, kind of wake it up for a little bit, and give it some more chance to warm up. And I need to warm up too. So my approach to inking figures these days is, especially when it comes to my comic book work, is one of simplicity, one of clarity, and trying to make, and maybe I've talked about this before, but just kind of like clean, economical brushstrokes. That makes sense. And that hasn't always been the case. Like, I definitely remember, like, the time when I started reading comic books was probably when I was 12 years old, 10 or 12 years old, maybe somewhere around that range. And that was easily, you know, during the Marvel era of John Byrne working on Fantastic Four, I would say, because I do remember that. I've stated multiple times on a couple of videos that one of my earliest recollections of comic books was an issue of the Fantastic Four by John Byrne, that the sideways issue, where he drew the story. The pages were all turned sideways, which was pretty cool, even for back then for me, and that always sticks out in my mind. I always remember that, I should say. It's very memorable. So for me, where was I going with that? The era of kind of approaching how I ink characters might kind of stem from artists of that time. That's not to say that, obviously, you know, having read comics starting from that point in time, you know, the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, that I haven't obviously followed comics since then. Obviously I have. And during the time since those comics of the 80s, I've been exposed to a myriad of different artists and comic book publishers. So growing up through the years, as I followed different companies and different titles and different creators, I come to, you know, admire and learn and kind of work to a certain degree to emulate certain styles, or you kind of gravitate toward a particular style. And as I mentioned in the last video for this page, that I've always had more of a what is the word? Representational approach toward the art. And for all intents and purposes, what that means is if you're a representational artist, you're pretty much doing the realistic approach, my style. And that's pretty fair to say. I mean, I can appreciate how in the last video, which is kind of funny, I was talking about thinking of myself more of as a cartoonist. And when you think of a cartoonist, you don't necessarily think like realism as far as like the artwork, but it doesn't mean that it can't have a certain realistic type of a look to it, kind of like a Neil Adams I would call him realistic, you know, almost photorealistic. I think actually he did use photos probably for reference at one point. Contrast that with like a John Romita Jr., who, as I've stated before, is one of my favorite storytellers in the comic book field. And for me, again, I've always aspired or just been drawn toward more of the as we call it, the representational type of art work. But that being said, I'm learning that there's room for a certain amount of caricature. And by that, in comic book work, and what I think what I mean by that is you can illustrate in a way where the characters have personality, and that could be the way in which you render a nose to be maybe a little bit more hook, or a little more flat, or a little more I don't want to say realistic, but a little bit more with character that would suit a particular character. So, but like for me, like, I mean, truth be told, like I'm always trying to, you know, draw the perfect ear, as in this case here, for this character. But even like from the perspective of being an artist who is working on his craft, trying to get it to where it is representational, even though like I'm kind of trying to learn to be a little bit less precious. And that was another phrase I used in the last video with my artwork, right? Trying to not be so precious with everything. Like right now I'm trying to be precious, but I think also kind of what I'm kind of trying to learn myself here is in trying to be kind of efficient with my brush strokes, I'm trying to think more about where I place each stroke, trying to minimize the amount of brush strokes I put down to kind of have that kind of cleanliness or efficient, and in all truth, really making the artwork less fussy is part of that process, I think, of getting to where I can employ these ideas of being to start entertaining, like maybe doing a caricature type style of approach, so the characters have such different faces and different personality. That way, what I'm trying to say is like so that the artwork the characters don't all kind of look the same. There are some artists where the characters kind of all look the same, like they all have the same face. They're wearing different costumes, right? And I can kind of understand that if you're an artist who you have a deadline to hit, and maybe that's just their particular style, and artwork still looks beautiful, but there is that feeling or that look where if you kind of drew them naked, you couldn't tell who is who, barring body type, I suppose. But if you look at the faces, they're all similar. It's essentially all the same face. And that's kind of interesting. Now for me, I do use reference from time to time. This picture here, this one, the drawing here of Casia, definitely, I have kind of sort of been using a particular model that I acquired via like a artist photo reference pack. So that I've kind of decided, okay, this is kind of be like the model for Casia, but I never really draw them to look exactly like them. So, but it's a good thing to have that kind of reference in your files, I guess. Yeah, your art files, your whatever you use, so that way you have something kind of grounded in reality. And again, because my style is a little bit more kind of in that vein, I'm going to want to have appropriate photo reference for that. So that's pretty much all I got to say about that. And let's see where I'm at here before I get too far along. All right, so when it comes to like doing metallic stuff here, shifting gears, I wouldn't say I've painted a lot of it, but I honestly just create what looks like kind of wavy, squiggle, somewhat sharp kind of these kind of curved, kind of organic looking strokes. And this, using a brush in particular, is really good for this kind of stuff, because you can get some really nice line weight variety, which is always crucial in our drawings in general, but to kind of create an illusion of something that's kind of like reflective, at least the way I probably have been exposed to it via comics, but like especially like just to create a different type of look here and kind of have it, especially once I get to color. I will say once I get to coloring this, it's gonna then rely on using coloring tricks of you know, playing with the background reflectiveness and of whatever's the hues and colors I use, tones in the background, to help complete that illusion. But when it comes to just the inking part, I find it kind of fun to do this and kind of be almost abstract in a way, yet still following. Obviously, right here I'm inking what are his abs, and it quite literally looks like abs of steel or metal, because of the nature of how I'm trying to make this look kind of reflective in a way, in that it's got these, maybe reflective isn't the right term, because right now it's all line, right? But it's just kind of imparting something that just is not, you know, it's different in the way compared to how this rock feels back here. Smoother, there's no really, there's nothing jagged about what I'm drawing here. Again, it's being efficient with the line work and keeping things smooth when it comes to kind of trying to render this out here. Okay, we got a few more. Let's see, how do I want to render this part? So what I want to do here is I want to leave a little bit of a highlight on the bottom portion of, maybe it'll help if I render. I'm going to grab a pen. In Baldor's costume, his armor has these lines here across the armor that I basically, design-wise, I'm intending for them to be just slight little, maybe I'm not sure the term, but like valleys. Like there is definitely like a little dip in there. But the reason I wanted to ink the lines here is because I wanted to have, again, a definitive boundary, so that I can keep, you know, I can basically ink right up to this line, this very line right here. Let me zoom in a bit more. Yet keep a clear spot right up here. So it's going to get dark here with some shadow, but I keep this top portion open, this area right here. And I may need to go in with some white out, because I really want this part here to open up, which we can do after the fact here. And I found that whenever I render metal, I just kind of have fun with it. Okay, I think that's good right there. Just kind of leave it at that. And so this is like his chest. This is like the bottom portion of the armor that represents like his lower pec. And for here, we're going to employ the same type of... Now there is light coming from this direction here is my intent. So I am going to leave this area lighter, but we're going to have maybe a little bit more shadow here. And I really like, I sound like a broken record, but this brush is so fun to use. It's convenient, and I don't have to dip it into an inkwell, because there's a cartridge in here. Again, highly recommend you check this out. If you're traditional and you like using, you know, like a watercolor brush of some sort, which is I 100% for, I just don't have the best setup here to set up the inkwell. I mean, I can do it, but I'm somewhat lazy, and if I have to get pulled away from this artwork, you have to really take care of that brush, because the Winsor & Newton brush is what I use, a Series 7, when I'm not using this type of brush here, this cartridge. And they're not cheap brushes. I've gone through a couple of them over the years, because once they do wear out, that tip, so the trick, or the thing about a really good paintbrush for inking or drawing or painting, is the point. The moment, well, let me back up. A really good brush will hold its point and its tip. It will forever be sharp. The moment that brush loses the ability to hold the point, the brush is pretty much toast. And you can use them for dry brush, or maybe not for quite as fine a detail. But the moment that brush loses its tip, the ability to hold a point, then the brush is, as I said, it's goners, and time to get a new brush. So the Winsor & Newton Series 7, number 3 brush, I think is what I use, is like the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of comic book artists, like back in the day, would use that brush. There's a couple of other brands out there that are really good, like Raphael, and that's the only one that honestly comes to mind at this time. But I like, again, the convenience of using this. Plus, I've traveled with this brush before, and it's so easy to put this in my computer laptop bag and use it to draw with. So highly recommend this brush. So we got a few more little loose ends here to tie up. Again, I'm drawing basically the border here of Casia's hair. But let's just go ahead and switch to a pen. And I'm doing more of the switching of the pen to use it where I want to get just a super straight, kind of almost flat mark. And that is fun to do that in itself. You can hear the scritching sounds, which is cool. And of course, for things like this right here, which kind of like this little symbol here on the kind of like the top of the cape that he wears. It's going to kind of be his symbol here. Using a pen is convenient and easy. All right, so we've got him inked up. Got a little bit of part of the crease down here of his clothing, his pants essentially. Pants are they're his clothing essentially. Not really gonna see much here, but I know what it is, so I need to get that filled in. Essentially, this is down near his crotch area, but again, it's kind of hard to read that here. But we'll put it in, and then we got a little bit of this kind of this upper thigh there, so we'll just put some kind of rendering. And if I really wanted to take it a step further, I would go in, maybe I'll do a little bit to see how I feel, and go in with the marker or the pen and draw some really more precise, like flat, consistent lines that would further help kind of give this feeling of something kind of metallic or just reflective. And again, I'm just totally taking liberty to say that this to me represents like something that looks reflective. And once I get it colored in, and I've colored in this character, he appeared at the very end of the Dream Awakens, which is the opening story arc for this my Realm Ethereal series. I did draw him, and so he's all done here. So we got this one character down. That is cool. And so far, so good. Next character we got inking here is Adon. Now Adon is an ethereal. And when I first conceived of him and, concept-wise and painted him, he didn't look anything like this. He's quite different. He's got a mask that he wears. In fact, all of the ethereals, who are like the main super powered up beings, let's just say for right now, in this universe, all have some kind of a mask, or what I like to call kind of like a faceplate. Usually this faceplate is kind of a symbol. However, throughout the course of the story and telling the story, I decided to reveal his face, and not only his face, but the other ethereals as well in that issue, with respect to that issue. Just because it was something that, you know, when I create these characters, here I am going off on another like left turn here. I did not know initially how they would play out, what they would, you know, what would happen. I mean, that story literally was me with a basic plot and kind of crafting it as I was going along, as I like to say. And these ethereals eventually came to a point in the story where I said to myself, well, you know what, I need to create something that would kind of shake things up. And I said, well, let's do something called this Ethereal Reveal. And in a way, this character, he has been revealed, and we get to see that, oh, he has kind of like this human form. Well, he's got a face, number one. We get to see his face, which kind of humanizes him, right? So considering that these ethereals are again, they're kind of like superpowered beings, but giving them this particular, showing their faces again, kind of was the point of kind of taking them from like mysterious to kind of giving them a personal identity. And so that's kind of where this developed, where we're seeing his face. And so, and again, as I said before, the other ethereals as well, I did reveal their faces too. We got to see the four main ethereals. That would be Ohm, Oda, Ina, and Kor. So we got to see them, saw their faces revealed. So that's something that was just kind of cool, and it made for an interesting story point here to change things up as I was writing the story, putting the story together, and continue to create and weave this story. So, okay, so we're getting him inked in. So this is all moving just pretty smooth, which is good. And we're just gonna pencil in some nostrils here, tiny nostrils. And this brush again is pretty good for this stuff. Although I will say again, I want to mention again, the Winsor Newton brush is just, that is a killer brush. Like with painting with like gouache, I could get so much fine detail. Like that number 4 Winsor Newton Series 7 brush is just a monster when it comes to being able to paint. And here we're inking, right? So not so much having to do with paint. However, it all just is, to me, it's kind of all the same thing. In fact, you have to pay real close attention to what you're doing here, or what I'm doing here, as I ink, as I make decisions on the fly on what to leave out and what to put down. If I'm going quiet for a while, it's just because I'm kind of really focusing here on my inking. As you can imagine, inking is, as I've said before, inking is like the most fun part when I'm creating my comic book, and I love it. All right, so we pretty much have him penciled in, and let's see. Yeah, the other thing too is like I have to also learn to not put so much detail on these faces, because this is an 11 by 17 piece of paper, and you know, when you put them online, I don't post them in super high resolution. And what that means is, because I don't, even when it is being posted online, I still want to make sure that the artwork is readable at a reduced size. And that is especially true for print, because this will get, this artwork will basically be reduced in size by probably by about 25% or so. So that when it goes to print in comic book format, things close up. And so, and what I mean by that is like things will close up, and you have to take that into account. At least I do. I try to when I'm doing my artwork here. So let's see how we do. We've got BALDOR. We have Adon inked here. And, you know, I think I want to add probably just a little bit more shadow kind of in this neck area. Although I say that, and what I've learned over the years is if you're thinking about adding it and you're not working digitally, don't put the ink down. Less render. And if you find that after looking at it, like you're like, yeah, you know what, I need to put something here because it just needs it. Then you can put it in, because you can use whiteout. And truth be told, I'm actually about to use whiteout on here. I over rendered this part of the arch of this portal gateway in the background, and it's blending in with the space background. So I'm going to eventually have to wipe that out. And I can do it digitally, but there's a part of me that, as someone who's working on his craft, I'm going to go in with actual opaque white and get it actually cleaned up. All right. So we've got 2 characters inked. And so far, so good. Now we're going to ink in our Dala here, our winged character, and as I do this, I'm just going to make sure I've got enough battery left. Inking our Dala here. Let's go ahead and see if we can zoom in on her, see what that looks like. Let's tighten up that, focus on that, I should say. And all right, so do we have her in position? We do. All right, so let's go ahead and start inking her. And she is probably, like, spatially the furthest character in the background. Well, between BALDOR, Casia, Adon, and so we have Arreola back here. So again, thinking about clarity and efficiency of line strokes and whatnot, kind of want to make her just really kind of simplified. I mean, you know, I want to make sure it looks cool and all that, but hopefully I'm not going to over render this part here. That's again one of the hardest things here, is not to put down too much ink. Let's just see what happens. Again, she also has kind of she's got like a metallic type of form, texture to her skin here. And part of keeping her pretty relatively simple and clean is because she is in the background. A lot more pushed back in the background compared to the other characters. So we're just going to do our best here to keep her relatively simply inked. While still imparting hopefully some kind of a metallic type of sheen. So going into this character here, very tight, close quarters I should say, making this render a little more somewhat tedious, although if I'm still thinking about how I'm inking this as being clean and precise and just really a lot more simplified, really shouldn't be an issue here. Because remember, this is going to be printed, and again, a lot of what I do here really has to do with the the thought of eventually getting these to go to print. So the idea is that this will print at a size that is comparable to your, pretty close to your comic book, your standard American US standard comic book size. Although when I put together the compilation, which was the Dream Awakens, that series, I printed that, had that printed at a slightly larger, a little bit larger than comic book size. Still the same proportions, but because the printer was able to offer the hardcover, which is what I did, I printed it out. I printed this in a printed that story arc in a collected edition that is on a hardcover, which is really cool. And so that is available, and so I opted for that rendition. Not rendition, that version of print. And it turned out really nice, if I do say so myself, as far as the quality of the print in all things, everything else considered. Okay. So this figure's coming under, pretty much coming up. And I'm going to switch from the brush here to the pen. We're going to be using our extra small pen tip here. Am I zoomed in pretty tight? We're going to see how tight we can get in here. Okay, that's pretty tight. All right, we're maxing out the lens here. I forget what focal point that is, focal length. So anyway, yeah, this face here, it's pretty small. The whole face could fit within the size of would be covered up by a dime or a penny. So I'm going to just kind of take my time, but just be really kind of plotting here about how I render this portion of the face. Noses are always tricky, especially when you're doing them small. You find that you don't really need that much, just a few, like here literally are 2 dots. And of course the mouth. Just like that. And then the face, I think I'm gonna draw the side of her face, the outline her jaw and her face, here her head, using the pen. Okay, maybe add a little bit of reflection here, or just some kind of indication of shadow. The same thing here. Maybe something that just kind of comes down just like that. All right, that's cool. And the hair, I am going to go in with the brush pen again. Again, trying to think, how can I make this just really simplistic, get the point across. And it's a little tricky sometimes getting this part here, because it is such a small rendering of the head and the hair, of course, and she's kind of a metallic textured figure, so the hair also is going to have that same kind of, as I was using throughout her figure here, something to impart the feeling of reflection. Although I'm not going to try and go overboard and do too much here, because again, it's like the smallest figure on this entire page, and I don't want to lose too much clarity by trying to over render the hair. So I think we're pretty good right there. There's a little bit of rock here on the side that I missed. Right here, this upper corner here on the screen. Like some floating portal stones. So we'll just kind of indicate that here. Just like that, okay. Now she's pretty much completed. I think I want to add a little bit of shadow there. Okay, good. And I'm going to stop there before I go any further. Like I'm somewhat tempted to go in here and add like some more like little squiggles and indicate, metal, but I'm not. I'm going to resist. The only thing left to render on our Dala here the figure is are her wings. So I'm going to switch to the pens. I'm going to take my handy little strip of tape here, which I used earlier when I was inking the background as a way to tape off or mask off the white, the gutter area here, because I want to create these lines here, these kind of like showing, kind of like showing motion, but also it's just part of her way I designed the character in a particular look. These lines right here, kind of showing motion of some sort. So we'll just kind of carry that through here with the rest of, let's say, the wing on this side here, and maybe not too much. I don't want to go overboard again. There's such a nice contrast already that's developed between the background having a lot of dark areas, and if we keep the characters kind of more simple, more open with white space in this case, I think that will preserve the clarity in the storytelling of being able to see the characters a lot more clear. So let's just kind of scooch back here. Go the rest of this wing. And I'm gonna kind of just pull a couple more of these lines. And in fact, the pen is a little too thick for my liking, so I'm going to switch that to this size here, and just kind of play with this here a little bit carefully. And the one thing I do want to do is make use of, again, the brush here. I'm going to try and kind of warm it up. I'm going to do a little dry brushing in part of the wing area here. Kind of go from, something like that. Though that will impart a different texture and look, which is I think something. Let me back out here. We're losing it. Bring focus. There we go. It's in the green. Okay, and just a few strokes, maybe just one really good drag them out, kind of. There we go, just like that. And then we're gonna try and maybe just hit one more on this left side, her left side. Like one nice one here, maybe. Hopefully it's nice. Again, dry brush is just, you kind of just throw it against throw it all against into the wind and see what you get. All right, cool. Maybe one more here. That is perfect. Okay, so our figure here, Arreola, kind of want to thicken up the outside of the hair here, just so it pops a little more against the background. And maybe I give some thickness to that part of the hair. Oh, I forgot this part of her hair down here. Let's make sure we get that inked in. Getting to thicken up this part of her hair so it sticks out, pops out against the background a little bit more. And I think this is completed here as far as rendering these background characters before I get into inking Casia here. So we have BALDOR here, we have Adon here, and then of course Arreola inked up in this section. So we'll eventually move into inking the main character on this splash page here coming up. Now going on to inking Casia herself. And similar to the approach I took with outlining the figures, like when I was doing the background which is another video. It was a video that precedes this one. I'm going to kind of also start out with also kind of just outlining her basic figure here. So this is jump in here, rendering a part of her shoulder. And I'm going to just really continue here. Nice, big, you know, heavy weight, thick lines. Okay, it's a good, heavy, thick line there. And so we've got a piece of part of her wrist here. Got her forearm, which is turned over. I love the way this brush just is able to go from thin, or from thick to thin, and just like really just kind of a thinner line here. Okay. Some really good thick, reason to use a heavy stroke here. Since this is the edge of the character, you know, her showing these edges here, which is crucial to show depth, right? When you've got these objects, or in this case, these characters, usually you're going to have them, like their body parts, their arms, their everything, basically almost everything will be a heavier, thicker stroke. Now with this here, with the arm and this band that's here, I'm going to do a little bit of kind of variety of line weight as I get closer to the edge of where this armband kind of overlaps. And the reason being is that I want to show, and it's subtle, but kind of how like the band is kind of slightly tightened on around her arm, and so you see a little bit of that pinching, or I don't know what the word is, where it's just kind of like, yeah, pinching, I guess, kind of tightened. So you'll see the arm, her arm slightly kind of, let me zoom in so I can more clearly explain this, or show it a lot closer. How as this band, which is kind of like an arm design of her costume, goes over the arm, how there's like a slight bend right here. See how that just kind of pinches in, meaning that this band actually affects her skin, her body. Like it actually has some consequence to it. Speaking in really large, super detailed speak, I guess, of how the weight, the tightness of that band is imposed upon the arm. So normally you wouldn't see that maybe on a character drawn to this scale, right? But because I'm close up and it's a splash page, I mean, it's kind of like a big deal to have the splash page, like with one big bold character, especially one big bold character being featured as Casia is on this particular page. Okay, pull that in. And I'm going to continue with like this, her left shoulder here. One of the cool things I discovered I think it was toward the end of last year, was using, the drawing board I'm using here, this will show you how long I've been drawing. I've probably had this since I was in junior college. In fact, I remember I bought this in the junior college store. I had like a small, like little art scholarship coming out of high school. And I remember buying this drawing board. It had to have been 92, 93, probably 92, because I graduated high school in 92 and subsequently went and enrolled in the local junior college where I live here that same fall. So, or the fall of that same year. And I've had this since 92. And I've only really started using it. I used to employ this board in such a manner, or in such a way that I would somehow try to find it, to prop it somehow and turn the board or turn the paper around, which I could do that here now. But I've discovered like being able to tape the artboard down, the drawing board to, I'm sorry, the paper down to the drawing board, which I now move the drawing board around. And it's probably the same difference between moving the paper around, but I find it just more not having to worry about securing the board or the paper to the board by putting the tape here, top and bottom, and then being able to maneuver this around as needed. So it's something I just discovered, despite having, even after all these years of having this board, of using this board in that manner. And truthfully, I think that came about because of me having to record, or me making these videos in this fashion. So, you can learn something new even after you've been at this for quite some time. And that's always fun, being able to use tools that you come to rely on, and then also like discover something kind of neat, a new way to kind of implement them in your workflow. So there's one little tidbit of information if you do use a drawing board like this. Maybe this will help you. So let me see. I'm going to try and adjust something here. Kind of drop. Hopefully that's got a bit more detail there. What I did there was I kind of dropped the exposure of the camera to get a bit more detail, hopefully. One of the things about making these videos is I have to I kind of have my attention is kind of split between a couple of things, really. I've got a camera overhead that I record with at the max recording time it'll do is an hour. And I have it attached with what is called a dummy battery, which is essentially where you would normally put the battery in this camera. I have essentially something that you put in there that's connected to a cord that essentially is a throughput or an input of the power, which in this case is being supplied by one of those large USB-C charging bricks. That's so that the charging, the life of the camera while I'm recording will last along that amount of time for an hour, and then I don't have to worry about taking out like the default, the normal Canon batteries, which the battery life on those aren't the longest. But again, it's all this technology. So my attention is somewhat divided, and as you can see, I'm not inking right now. I need to get back to inking, but I guess I should fill in the time with something, right? But yeah, the camera overhead, my attention is focused partly on making sure the battery doesn't die on me, because if it does, I will lose this entire video recording. So, and I have had that happen when I used an off-brand of battery that was in the camera, and I plugged it in. I dropped those batteries in, and there was no indication of the battery going low, like, with the little bars. But because apparently this third-party battery that I bought, and I didn't realize it at the time, was its fault. So if I wasn't using an OEM battery from Canon, it would not read the bars on the life of the battery on the camera. So essentially those were basically bad batteries, and I was doing a recording for something, and it's probably realm ethereal related. And lo and behold, I look up and like it had stopped recording, and I thought initially like, oh, okay, it caught up to a certain point that I was drawing, right? And then nope, the entire file for that session had pretty much been rendered useless. It was a DAT file. And I researched online. I guess there's some places that might be able to open up a DAT file. And, I did the cheap version of like trying to upload the file and see if it could, not sure what the term is, decode it or bring it back to life. Anyway, it didn't work. It's done and gone. It's lesson learned. So always use genuine batteries for all your electronic devices is the only only wisdom I can impart as a result of learning that lesson. So anyway, that was a diversion for a slight diversion for whatever it's worth for my fellow techies here. All right, so just continuing to basically just do a bunch of outline stuff here. All the easy stuff, there's always a sense of trepidation on my part when I go to ink like a major piece like this. This is a major piece for me, but the character in this case is a major focal point, and it's not going to be perfect. I'm sure there'll be parts of the illustration, the drawing here when I'm done, that's like, oh, that kind of did not come out the way I had envisioned, but it turned out well enough, hopefully, to keep the page viable, and it tells the story, moves the story along. In this case, this is a splash page, so it's really just, it's kicking off the story, but at the same time, like, as of this recording, again, I hadn't probably drawn anything since the cover to the wraparound cover for the collected edition of the Dream Awakens, and so it's fun to get back to inking these characters. So that is part of the trepidation, is like, oh, hopefully I don't screw up the inking part. But if we do, then you do. I mean, if I do, then I do. So, all right, so let's go ahead and make sure we have her face here in. We'll zoom in just a bit. And see, I'm gonna edge her face in here. I'm gonna start by doing her ear. She's got attached earlobes, I guess. So do something like that. All right. I'm gonna wait for this to dry just a little bit. I don't want to smudge that there. The left part of her chin there. And of course, I'm going to draw this part of her neck. And it should be dry. If it isn't dry, I'm going to do this. I'm going to place this over. I used to do this a lot as a kid when I was like 14, 15 years old. I remember I would place this down so I wouldn't have to worry about smudging things. The only thing you have to worry about is that you don't move the sheet around. So that will help protect this part here. So let's draw this side of her face. Get that going, something like that. All right, that looks okay. And we'll just kind of tie in her chin here, the bottom part of her head. Just like that. Clean, simple, nothing too fussy. The other side of her ear, there's some shadow going on here in the side of her ear. So we'll just indicate a simple little shadow just like that. Again, nice and just clean. That has been my challenge to myself in rendering figures in particular, but just in general. So now I've got the hand here, and one thing I just realized is she does not have gloves, and I don't have fingernails drawn on here. So let's go ahead and draw fingernails, because we do have a gloveless hand here, and I'm not using any reference. So let's see, based on what I understand of the human anatomy, I'm going to kind of give her a thumb here. Need to kind of close this out, finish that up. And with this fingernail, we're going to kind of have it run something like this. Maybe I should pull out reference for this. Well, screw it. Let's just do it. I say that, and I'm kind of worried here. Something like that. This finger, we're just going to barely show the outside of the nail there. And for here, we're going to round in this part. Do something like that. And the thumb, she's got a little bit, show just like the edge of the nail there. Let's see, this thumbnail. Sometimes I'll take my own hand and take a look at it. I'll kind of turn my hand around here from this perspective. So notice something. We have this part here, which is near the cuticle. And It's going to go here, and this is going to actually go whoop. It's going to scoop up just like that. Just a slight around, straight, and scoops up. We might do that the same thing with this fingernail too. This one, probably something similar. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Again, I'm not going to be too fussy, and like, I know people are like, oh my God, you're trying to hone in your craft and you're totally just calling home, or what's the term? Calling in, phoning in the artwork here. The reference, although this fingernail does look kind of weird here. It looks weird, like it's kind of bitten or chewed or something. So we'll seek to simplify here. And then we'll just do that. Yeah, hopefully that will be okay. Maybe I won't quite ink the fingernails yet, and I'll go as far as I can tonight with the inking. Might have to do this in a couple of takes before I put this video out. That goes out saying. In fact, this is the second take, or the second go around, because I inked BALDOR, Adon, and Arreola over the course of this, well, in the first night, and then I finished a little bit of her just prior to me starting inking this here. And I see one thing I want to fix on her hair. There we go, that looks better. All right. Now going back to Casia. Let's just go ahead and kind of start in on her. I know there's a lot of details here, renderings within like her body, the costume, but I'm going to kind of go into the hair, because with the hair, and I'm going to actually have to outline her hand, get at least the outer portion rendered, inked, just like that, because I need to have that as a border, right? To know how far I can go with the inking of the hair, and where my boundaries are with respect to her fingers. So that necessitates inking at least the fingers. So I'm gonna kind of avoid the fingernail areas and maybe hit those later. Okay. All right, there we go. So now let's just kind of go into her hair. Started a little bit of it here as I was beginning to paint or ink in the background in that first video. So let's see, where should we start? We're just going to jump right in here. She's got these kind of flyaways, I think, are what they're called, in her hair. And again, I did use a model as a reference for this, and I actually have selected a model to use as the basic reference for my Casia character this time around. I used a lot of different images that I found and that I have or located elsewhere to draw Casia in different angles. And for the first issue, the first story arc, the Dream Awakens. But this time I specifically found one that I decided, let's just use her as a general reference, mostly for the face, maybe not quite the figure. Not that, it depends on what I'm trying to draw and if there's an appropriate pose, but more importantly for me, it's the face for having a recognizable character to a certain extent, that this is Casia. But of course, changed up. It'll be kind of like an interpolation, if you will. I just learned of that word tonight. In a totally non-related subject. But anyway, I'm digressing. To use that model as a basis for a certain amount of consistency, but for also a really helpful reference. And so that's where this particular pose came from. So I'm utilizing this model. I use photo reference from a couple of places. I get them online. I get them from ArtStation and Cube Brush as well. A lot of times they'll carry some of the same photo reference packs by some of the same photographers or digital creators that make these packs available. And I don't use reference for every single thing that I draw. because that would just be way too time consuming, I think. But I use it in critical instances, especially when I don't know, when I can't fake an angle. And for me, a lot of that are like headshots that are from up from under, or from a weird 3/4 overhead view where the nose becomes positioned and the chin and the ear gets turned at such a not a normal angle that I need to have that reference. And it would be a huge tell-all if I tried to fake something, and maybe people wouldn't even recognize or realize that, but to me, I would know that that was the case. And I certainly don't want that. I mean, that's just me being the craftsperson, trying to just be honest with myself and wanting to make myself live up to the standard, even when there's no one really here to keep me to that standard. I mean, it's all myself, right? So, but it's all making art, and so I will gladly do that, because that's what I do. So, all right, so we're inking more hair here, getting this edge here. Might have some edges get kind of faded out, or not faded out, kind of dry brushed. But for the most part, so far so good, I think, with the hair. And we're gonna have this part be kind of more in shadow. So we're gonna get a little, just kind of drop in this dark area here, just like that. It might even get a little bit more dry brushy. Okay, and that's cool. Again, man, this Kuretake brush pen is just killer. I love this thing. I probably should go buy a few more on Amazon, so that way I've got a stash of them lying in wait, ready to be used, because there will be a time when this brush will probably we'll give up the ghost, you know what I mean, and we'll die out, and that will. I'm so attached to this brush. So, in fact, I think I'm going to do that as soon as I'm done with this recording here. I've recommended it a lot online, and a lot of people have I say a lot of people have picked it up, and yeah, I do have an Amazon affiliate account, and I can definitely see that, some orders come across, and I don't make a lot. I mean, honestly, truth be told, my Amazon, I don't make a whole lot of money off it. I think in 1 year I might make $300. Not enough to live on. It's enough to buy more Strathmore drawing paper and more pens and pencils and stuff. But even these pens here do tend to dry out. So you need the artist Faber-Castell Pitt pens, which are the ones I use to ink my comics when I'm not using the brush pen here, the Kuretake. So in that way, people who do support me through Amazon, say what you will about Amazon, but I do use them. Okay. And to each their own. But as far as like this pen, again, I highly recommend it. I love it, especially if you've not inked with the brush before. It would probably be to your advantage or to your benefit to get a real brush and kind of practice with a real brush, and then try this brush pen, just so you can see the difference. If I'm going to use a real brush, I'm going to use a Winsor Newton Series 7, number 3 or number 4 to ink my comic books. It's essentially a watercolor brush. Or you can paint with gouache. It's the same brush that Alex Ross inks with. And that's like the Cadillac of brushes, because I've inked a lot of my comics using that prior to getting this pen. And that is a nice pen, or a nice brush. So the reason why I don't use it is because the setup and the cleanup for it, and I'm not in a position where I could say this is my full-time job, and it's not a matter of finances, it's just a matter of care for the brush. And when you're inking with a real brush like that, especially one like that, which is not cheap, it might run something along the lines of $25-30 depending on where you get it. which is more, which I haven't bought them in a while, so I don't know what they cost nowadays in today's, world of commerce online. But that's pretty expensive for a brush. And if you do use them a lot, like I once saw, I think in an interview or read that Alex Ross uses it so much that he literally will wear out the tip in like maybe a month. But then again, that's his job. He's painting artwork. He's painting covers, and that is his. This is his thing, and so he does wear them out a lot. But and I've worn out a couple of those original brushes myself, and they just get relegated to like brush purgatory, where I get to use them for doing spatter effects or dry brushing. But anyway, you try that. And then get this here, and then you'll realize the difference. Because I think it's important to understand how to work with a real brush, and then transition to this brush pen here. Or don't take my advice and just go straight for the brush pen. I would be, I think, remiss if I didn't at least advise to take a real brush and kind of get used to that. Just simply because I think there's a really good learning curve if you could do that. But but then if you're a digital artist doing your artwork digitally, well then that's cool. You will probably never need to touch one of these. Although for a time I was doing a lot of digital artwork, and I just had to get away from it just because when I first learned to draw, and there may be some of you out there who learned on a computer strictly or an iPad or whatever, and you did not necessarily pick up a pencil or a brush to do artwork on paper, and that's okay too. Making art is making art, in my opinion. But I think I was just longing to get back to these traditional mediums, because everything else that I do is online. My day job, doing a little bit of marketing and working in the world of social media and whatnot, and video creation and stuff like that. Outside of these videos, there's some professional work that I do. But getting back to this seemed to make a lot more sense, and a lot more of a sense of kind of going back to where I started with traditional media. And it's been actually a really nice to get back to drawing with ink on paper. And I think some of that was also influenced just by the fact that as I started studying more of the old, should I say old time artists, the classic artists, the iconic artists in the comic book field, a lot of them just worked with traditional materials because that's all they had. And there are obviously a ton of amazing now modern artists, and you need to have that, but you get to a point where like you kind of get back into kind of like where you first discovered and your artwork, and to learn to draw. And for me, it all started out with using traditional media, which I think every artist should at least be versed in to a certain extent, like a very basic pencil on paper, and maybe ink. Don't have to do that. At some point you may find yourself kind of getting back into this medium, or discovering traditional materials again, and just how really they force you to be. Force is probably not the term I want to use, but you think a little bit more about the strokes that you put down on the paper before you commit to them, and that's a real thing, because especially when you are working traditional. I realize in my video recordings that sounds really garbled when I say traditional. It sounds traditional, but I will try to be a little more, pronounce a little more cleanly, perhaps. But as I was saying, like getting back into inking with pens on using ink and paper is just There's a weird term I'm going to use here. There's a lushness to it, I think, that to me can be emulated with digital tools, but the lushness of this brush stroke right now, and I'm gonna really zoom in here because this is a spot, I think, in the inking where I can just really talk to this. So right here, I've got the pencil marks, and right here, I'm almost like, I want to create light and shadow, and right now, honestly, my thoughts are like, as I ink this, I'm trying to channel my best Al Williamson, to be honest. Like, that guy can just, his inks, if you ever look up his inks, look up Agent, is it X14? I should know this, man. I apologize. But there's a comic strip he drew back in the day. At least I think he drew. I mean, a lot of artists back then that were in the syndicates, newspaper, meaning like newsprint and stuff, they may have had assistants, and I wouldn't put that past anyone to probably have an assistant to probably help them out, right? Because those were daily strips. But if you look at all that, and if he did draw everything, which I have no reason to believe he didn't, but again, just kind of prefacing that his brush work is just so masterful. It's so lush, and that's kind of what I'm trying to emulate here. Just like there's a lushness to it, and that's just my phrase that I use for it. It's just so lush in the way like the ink goes down, and I love that feeling. That I can tell you for a fact, I don't get that when I'm inking with digital. That's just me. But this lushness here is just, this is the fun part of inking right here. I feel like what I'm doing here is, yes, I'm trying to create hair, but really when you look at a lot of the great painters and artists, like when they render hair, it almost looks like it's so, like they put down the marks and then they were done, like bam, just like that, done, move on. Maybe we put a little bit more contrast on this side of the hair and we just go whoosh, boom, and it's just in there. Like, that's what I love about inking with a brush like this. I'm going to thicken up just a little bit of this hair because I want this to pop out against the background just a bit more. It's a pretty busy background. And we're just going to add some I'm going to add some thickness here to a couple of these flyaways, just like that. So yeah, getting to ink this hair like this is a lot of fun. And again, inking has always been my favorite part of drawing my comics. And again, I don't pretend to say I'm a great inker or even a great artist, but this is where it's at for me. I get to a point where I love this stuff so much that I just start talking gibberish about it, and I should probably just get to inking here. So, all right, let's just keep inking some more hair in here, playing with light and dark, creating a good contrast. And I was talking about, let's see, try to create some form here. And we're not going to use too much lines. We're not, hopefully I've graduated beyond the point of rendering hair that looks like spaghetti. And what I mean by that is drawing hair that is just it's just line. Like I want to create patches of where the light is hitting, and we have almost like, what is like a stark, what's the term? Not stark. The term, is it specular? I know in photography, and when I was working in print, you had these specular highlights, which are supposed to be like pure, there's like in print, pure white is the value of the paper that you're printing on. So, but otherwise you would want to have, even in some of your whites, and I'm transitioning to a weird topic here. I'm talking about print because I have a print background. I used to do pre-press work. And I got in just as they were pulling out the wall camera, the bellows style wall camera, where they would shoot negative, or, well, see, I didn't even get to do that, so I'm not really sure, but I guess like shooting film and doing, they had a stat camera. So I got into print at the time when that was phasing out. That was probably about mid-90s. But anyway, where was I going with that? The highlights. In print, you have your highlights being the white of the paper, but in terms of like when you're doing when you're printing white, you want to have some dot in there. And by dot, when it comes to print, we're talking about CMYK. So your whites should have like a tiny amount of like a little bit of red, yellow, cyan in there, so that you don't just have a blank white. You don't have what's called like a blowout, right? And so you would you'd have to do things with calibrations and go into Photoshop and make sure that the rip, that's a word I haven't said in a while. If anyone here has worked in printing and knows what a rip is, leave a comment in the comments section. Yeah, I would have to make adjustments to the rip, a profile, so that way we would, make sure we captured certain values when it was sent over from the application, the print application, where it was laid out, whether it was Quark Express, which is a page layout program. I don't even know if that's used anymore. Everything has gone to InDesign or Affinity Designer. But I still use I use InDesign for ever since it came out. But anyway, getting back to the hair, I want to leave areas where it's clearly just open white and not trying to necessarily render in all these lines, because it's nice to have parts where you have dark contrast. Like right here, I just threw that in there and balanced out with white, and in this case a nice open space there of white. Okay, and then here we're just going to get, again, I'm just going to kind of go really just dark here to create some shadow. Now this part here is where I feel like I'm a painter. I'm just kind of putting down these these little strokes that are just kind of almost nonchalant, and that is nothing to do with reality. It has to do more with just kind of interpreting light and dark and creating a texture to the hair, a pattern of light and dark. Because in comic book art, that's all you really have as far as the inking portion is areas of light and dark. And I'm just going to full on just make this black right here. And that creates a nice contrast. And let's see where we're at here. We'll add some more here. Some nice big juicy lush strokes just like this to kind of indicate a little bit of hair texture. We'll create a little bit of maybe we'll put a little bit of strands in there, not too much, and just kind of keep going at it here, just like that. All right, we're continuing here with inking the hair. I see some flyaways here. I kind of want to just kind of get those kind of wisps out there. And then here we'll create some contrast to balance out what we're to show. This wisp here kind of stands out because we've got this thicker dark pattern here, hopefully adding some contrast to this little wisp here. And then we'll balance that out with a little more dark here, just like that. And then we'll do some kind of fun here. Just kind of take this and kind of zag it around. Same thing here. A lot of heavy darks here. Now she's a redhead. She's got red hair, I should say. So it's important to kind of keep these light areas, especially just light. And when I go to color this, I will obviously take a look at what it looks like on the scan, because that's yet another layer, right? Another layer that I'm going to be placed out, removed, seeing it through different eyes, so to speak, and I'll be able to kind of take a look at what's happening there. See how I want to color things. So we're getting pretty close to finishing up her hair. The camera is almost overheating. It's still in the white. There's these bars. So I'm filming this on an overhead camera that is a Canon. I've mentioned this before. I guess I'm just being redundant, but it's the Canon R50C, I think. And it can overheat. And I do have the Iceman fan on top, which is something that goes on the back of the camera, where the display panel pops out, and it's meant to cool down by way of touch the camera. I mean, I don't know how much it helps. It helps that probably it's not that we're in cooler climes at the time, at this moment in time right now where I live, and I am out on the West Coast, so it's not like it gets terribly cold, but it's certainly not warm by any stretch, and it is helping with the camera not overheating. But yeah, there's a fan, and it's kind of right now, it's 2/3 white bars on the temperature as before it starts to overheat. And usually what will happen is that camera will go to all white, and then it'll start showing yellow bars, and then finally it'll go to red, and then that's when I just have to make sure that I turn the camera off, stop recording so I can save the recording. So that's my commentary on that camera. Good camera otherwise. All right, so again, trying to balance out the lights and the darks. And by the way, I do have a monitor, like you can't see here, that is like directly in the front. So that's where the camera feed output is going to, as far as how I can see what things look like in the shot, right? So that's even like another way to look at the artwork as I'm inking it. I get to see it over in real in front of me right here as I'm making this, and I get to see it in front of me on my computer monitor. All right, getting close to finishing up the hair and adding in some good contrast, some lights and darks here. And again, I'm doing this as a was it real time? It's not a time lapse. So that's kind of cool. It's going to be somewhat of a long video, and for those of you who do stick around to listen to this, I appreciate that. I don't, when it comes to inking, I kind of go on cruise control. At least that's how I feel. That's why I like inking so much. It has a certain permanence that it's kind of trained me over the years to think in terms of being efficient with my brushwork. And then, a lot of the comic book work that we see, in fact, all of it, if not with some exception, is all the inker's handiwork that we see, because that is usually whose work actually gets printed on gets printed on paper. In these comic books, it's the inker's work. So I think in my mind of those inkers I mentioned, of those artists. Now I have a lot of favorite artists that ink their own work, others that don't, that have an inker. Again, Al Williamson's one of my favorite inkers. But over the years, if you think about like John Byrne with Terry Austin, and Frank Miller with Klaus Janson on Daredevil, and so on and so forth. Just a few I'm living out, but those are the ones that most come to mind. Those inkers, I try to think in terms of like light and dark, thinking how would so-and-so do this? And then what's my own take on it? And then what also is being communicative? What is being like, is something, what makes it still good storytelling that is clear? And that's important as well. So pretty much done with this here. Woohoo, got the hair inked in, I'm not sure, all of maybe 30 minutes. So yeah, we are good to go with this part here, and then I'm sure I'll get to inking on the figure itself pretty soon. Or coming up. I'm segmenting this video. Okay, ready to start inking on the main central character here on the page, Casia. So I'm going to start off with the hands, I think. Let's get our trusty brush here kind of awakened. As you watch this is one video. At least that's my intent, to release this. But it's taken me over the course of, I think, 3 evenings, this being the 3rd evening. So we got, had my work cut out, of course, obviously on this page. Yeah, a relatively easy page though, in terms of like what's actually on the page, right? We only have the 3 characters. But getting to do the inking here. The final, again, the main character here is kind of like almost like the payoff, really. And I made an earlier video talking about inking backgrounds first. And now that I've done that, at least in this instance, I can really see how the argument or the reasoning, I'm going to back up a little bit here, for really keeping the central character nice and open and clean, because there is a lot going on that surrounds her hair, the background. Then we have the other characters, of course. So I'm really now going to take my own advice and like really practice what I preach here, so to speak, in drawing the characters cleaner, more simple, in a way that just makes the artwork hopefully more readable, and also gets the artwork done quicker, all things considered, of course. In the perfect world, I'd be able to devote an entire day to doing this, and during the week, that's just not possible. But possible on a weekend, actually. Okay, I'm going to kind of jump around here. I should finish up her fingers here, her thumb. Go up here. Let's see, this fingernail, it's got a little bit of overlap here. Just some dimensionality here. Just like that. Yeah, when I look at a lot of the work I've done, you know, as far back as 15, 20 years ago, I do see the kind of like the attention to trying to render every single little crease and stroke, or every little crease or bend in whatever anatomy I'm rendering, whether it's a hand in this case, or whether it's human anatomy, you know, the muscles. And when I'm inking nowadays with a brush especially, it really turns it to where, or makes it to where I'm a lot more conscious of making, again, simple strokes to convey the most amount of information with the least amount of line work. And I mean, I think that's always a pretty good goal to have, right? You don't want to draw any more than you have to, necessarily, especially in comic books when we're trying to render multiple pages of a story. And that's just something I'm focusing on here. So I'm going to pull out here just a little bit on the camera as I get to kind of start rendering parts of her upper shoulder, upper clavicle area here, maybe parts of her costume. Speaking of her costume, Casia's costume here is, you can't see it obviously in this rendition because this is the inking phase, but it does have some blues and some golds in there. And also, again, a bit of a indication, or a, how shall I say, kind of in its own way, the costume, parts of the costume's texture would almost indicate that there's also some kind of metallic or shiny sort of surface happening here in her costume, I should say. And that's through design. There's a little bit of part of that, I should say, is me really just enjoying making these brush strokes here. Meaning I really just enjoy kind of playing around with these kind of curved type of strokes here that would indicate, again, in my world, that's what I try to make it seem like it's metallic. But no, it has also a very lively and organic feel to it, which is always probably easier to render, to be quite honest. Like when you're drawing stuff that's in nature, you can kind of get away with drawing stuff that doesn't look 100% representational. Whereas if you draw a human figure and there's just something that doesn't look correct with proportions, then that's harder to overlook or maybe even push past the reader. But when it comes to like this kind of organic stuff, and I am drawing a character here, a person, but elements of what I'm drawing down, what I'm putting down here are very much just, they're ethereal actually. And they are just kind of, in a way, abstract too. Even though I'm trying to indicate some sort of shine here. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of some kind of, a little bit more definitive work to kind of show like there's some kind of bunching up here. So I might add some value by way of indicating this kind of that linear type of shading here. Okay, so, and then we have some on her back here, kind of like the back area. As always, keeping an eye on all the technology that surrounds me that makes this possible. The camera, the fan, the battery that the camera is running off of for juice. Making sure we don't run out. Okay, and we'll kind of mirror, kind of emulate some of this shading here. Although, I'm going to also invoke one of my rules, which is if I'm not sure whether I should put it, I'm going to hold off from rendering something there. So I'm going to kind of leave it open for now. And I will just continue to just adding, again, this kind of ethereal type of shadowing here that's part metallic and part just shapes, somewhat abstract in a way, but also adding some kind of indication of form of what's happening with structures within the piece itself. So speaking of structures here, there's like a ring here that kind of clasps this part of her costume together. Whether it's like physically possible in the real world, we're not going to contest that or try to reason that it is. It is super. I mean, comic book costumes are to be taken with a grain of salt. Even in Hollywood, I remember watching, which was for the longest time one of my favorite superhero movies of all time, which was Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. How even when he wore the mask, he actually had underneath the mask kind of like a hockey mask or something underneath to help shape what we saw on the outside, you know, Spider-Man's head. I thought that was like, wow, okay, so even in Hollywood, they've got to create, obviously in Hollywood, you've got to do what you got to do to make these costumes believable, but also look aesthetically pleasing, but then also make them live up to what the fans expect to see. And that was cool to see that. So underneath Tobey Maguire was the actor, and he had like a little shaped face mask to help keep that nice symmetrical flow to the face, when I'm sure for the camera, as opposed to like, and I'm going to guess here, like what we saw on TV as kids, and as children, and if you remember this, like the Electric Company had their version of Spider-Man, right, in that costume running around. Don't know if they had the same type of makeup back then, or a costume, whatever you call it, you know, to construct that. But anyway, there's definitely some structure happening here, and trying to show that here with the rings, like this part of her top, which covers obviously her bust area here, kind of converges here, and then there are these three rings that magically or ethereally come together to create a clasp here. And again, all's fair in fantasy and comics, as I like to say. And we will move on. So I'm just going to take my pit pen here and just add some easier to render kind of metallic rendering here. And you'll have to forgive me as I kind of semi-describe what's going on and kind of veer off into different topics as I ink. It's quite a bit to manage as you're doing inking, and then because this I intend to obviously post this video as a not a time lapse, but a full-on real-time video. So this is definitely some long-form content we got going on. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move into her left shoulder here. And we're, again, keeping things super clear, super clean up here, not getting too incredibly detailed, but still wanting to have impact by way of like large, bold, kind of lush strokes here. So far, so good. And this shoulder area, as I'm inking this, this is page 1, the splash page of the Sky Dreamers, and there's going to be pages 2 and 3 following this, obviously. But I intend for those 2 pages to be the true kind of opening splash page. It'll be a double splash, and I am contemplating in this area here and showing a reflection of something that shows up in that double page spread. So I'm going to leave this open for now. This side of her shoulder, as I literally contemplate that in my head for like a split second here or two, as we ink and render her shoulder in here. So we're going to I'm going to add some kind of like some transition strokes here. And then from here, we'll add some more definitive brush strokes here, and then kind of go into some more like metallic type of feeling, kind of flowy strokes here. And if I were to try to ink this with a pen, it's not impossible. It's just the flow of a brush and the ability to create such varied line weight that to me is just something you can't quite emulate with a pen in my experience. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of cross hatching here. And we'll do some cross hatching right here, as I've indicated in my pencil work. Okay, just like that. And then we'll create a kind of a crisscross pattern here to indicate some of that crisscross, and just indicate a little bit of some transition here, some shading, if you will. Okay, so that's pretty much it for her costume as it relates to parts of her physical self, right? Her body, the shoulders, the arms, parts of her chest. So now we're going to move into actual parts, like areas of her face that are I need to render here. I'm going to try and get a good zoom in here as I jump into what is like the main event here. All right, let's just kind of jump into this here. I'm going to get a little more I don't want to say artistic, but just I kind of really have to put on my thinking cap here and just really play with keeping things simple. That's kind of the theme, right? Not overly rendered. We'll see if I'm successful with that. And then this page will be ready, will be completed. So as I mentioned, I did use photo reference for this particular pose of this character. As I mentioned, I do have a model that I'm going to be using throughout the series, so that if I do need to reference the face or some particular pose that is a little bit more challenging to just try and pull out of the air, make up out of my head, I have a consistent model to reference. So that is a nice thing. Okay, cool. We got some kind of feathering there. And in this part here, her neck, there's going to be basically it's kind of like some rim lighting here, some shadow that I intend to draw in this phase. So kind of have to pick my starting point here and still keep things smooth and clean and simple and readable. And we're going to want to transition this part here, part of the neck. And I kind of really do want to drop this area just in darkness here, like in shadow, to create some contrast into that, kind of like what is essentially like the collarbone area here, going into the neck portion, which goes into that area. And then right here, we have a couple of folds, skin folds. Just not a ton, just enough. And then we have some shadow right here. And we're going to kind of leave like a little bit of some, what I'm going to think of as a bit of some reflected or some light within the shadow area here. So let me run this part and I'll kind of talk through it. So this right here is some shadow that is kind of like reflective. And this area within here will be, when I color it, it will be dark. But as you can see here, I've got the shadow like on this part of her neck, which is toward her right side. I'm just going to kind of create some of this this reflective shadow here, this kind of rim lighting here. All right, so we're going to stop right there. Going to kind of move into her ear here, which is slightly covered by her hair. Again, going to try and be simple about this and just as precise as I can be. A couple of squiggles. Boom, it's done. And let's see. Going to go into, from here, I'm going to go into her eyes, and I'm going to switch to the pens. I want to get a nice, clean, not perfect circle. You know, the eyes, unless I'm pulling out my circle gauge template, I'm not really aiming to get a perfect circle here. But the pen's going to help me maintain a consistency that I'm going to use because I have the tools at my disposal and I want to employ them. So essentially, I'm getting to the point where I really just want to make sure that I get a lot of this stuff, especially the iris here and the outer portion of the eye, just nice and clean. And with a brush, it can be done, but I'm just taking advantage of the tools I have because I do want this page to look nice. So I'm not saying I can't do it with the brush, but really that's all I'm using that pen for, is just literally just to outline the parts of the eyes itself. So from here, we're going to go back to the brush. So that was just a quick little changeover, but we're back to our brush. And you're going to start with the eyelash here. Eyelashes. Now, if you've not used a brush before, I love using brushes. In this case, I really love using this brush pen. I've mentioned that a million times at this point. And this is 1,000,001, but it really is a different, and to me, a lot more fun inking with a brush. It can be a challenge, to be sure. I'm not going to deny that. I think one of the first brushes I used early on when I first did it was probably when I was like 14 years old. And it was a challenge back then. And Now, when I did it, I'll take that back. I was doing it from a painting perspective, like learning to paint, right? So different than inking a comic book page of comic book artwork to a certain degree, because here we're drawing, we're doing line work, and with watercolor, you know, you're doing washes, and there is drawing, don't get me wrong. The foundation of all good painting, as far as like representational artwork is concerned, is a strong drawing. So it's just a matter of learning how to draw with the brush and learning to translate what most of us learn when we first learn to draw, which is a pencil and then maybe a pen at some point, or maybe with crayons. But learning how to transition and find the same point that you do with a pencil or pen on a brush, and that's where really good tools make the difference. So if you decide to buy a brush, you don't want to start off with a piece of garbage brush. I'll just start off by saying that, because if you have a tool that is not the best one that you can start with, this is not like learning to drive a car. You want to use a good enough, what I mean by that is, like, most of us, at least I did, we all practiced on some kind of junker car or an older vehicle before we got turned loose and got to drive, you know, the nice car, at least in my experience. So, but with our art materials, you don't want to go overboard for sure, but you do want to get a good brush that you can use. And I'll drop some links in the description of this video of some brushes I think, if you're new to this, you can try out, that I would recommend, that aren't going to break the bank, but that will put you, in my opinion, in a pretty good spot to ink with a brush. Okay, so we got some eyes here, very faint little crease there. And she's got these smaller eyelashes. So we'll draw a few here. This, and I always, truth be told, I still get nervous when I ink these eyelashes down here. They can be tricky, but again, I'm just going to go for it, because that's what I do. All right, so now the nose. Let's go into the nose area here. We'll start by indicating some transition here. Excuse me, what I mean by transition is, like, I know there's going to be a pretty solid shadow right here, that because the light is being cast from her left. And by transition, well, you know what? I may not even do it. What I was going to do is I was going to indicate like a little bit of a faint rim light here, but I think I don't want to do that. I'm going to leave it out and see what this looks like. So for right now, let's just go down to her nostrils here, and we'll just get this painted. Remember, the fewer lines you can put down, especially on a face, but like especially on a character, female character, if they're somewhat younger, the better off you are with just keeping the face readable and clean and having it look, to a certain degree, there's an attractiveness to it, but not necessarily because, like, you know, the person is a model, but there's a cleanliness to the artwork. And we're just going to kind of roll with that intention for now, at least in my head. So again, keeping things simple. Cross-hatching here, I don't want to get too crazy, because then I could have a mess on my hands. And again, less is more. And if you're not sure about putting it down, don't put it down. As far as just the ink, kind of fall back, if you will. Fall back, as they say. Let's see. There's a little bit of some contour on her nose here. But again, I'm going to keep this a pretty simple line, just to indicate her left nostril there. And let's see, I am going to draw this part of the nose, the bottom part here. I'm forgetting what the technical anatomical term is. And then we have her right nostril here. Then we have the other nostril. If I've gone quiet, it's because I'm focusing. Okay. And we are going to add some shadow here to kind of round out the rest of the shadows that are taking place on this side. So I think that's going to work for now. Now, let's go to her eyebrows. So what I've learned with eyebrows is, depending on the person's complexion or their hair color, it's a consideration for how you ink the eyebrows. So for Casia, she's a redhead. She had red hair. Kind of want to take this and kind of lightly, hopefully I can get pretty light with this here. We'll see. And then that'll work. I'm going to kind of outline the rest of this here. I'm not going to necessarily just draw a bunch of lines there. We're going to kind of leave it open. Maybe I'll add a few, keeping it light, because that indicates light, like light eyebrows. Okay, let me turn this over here because I need to get my angle set up for the pull. And then I want to create at the outer edge here of her eyebrows, kind of like a pull and just kind of fade. Super light, just like that. So essentially we have her eyebrows pretty much done. I may add just a little bit of a thicker line, just like that. And then I can kind of say that that will suffice. I could get this maybe just a little bit bushier up here. And then again, if I'm not sure if I should put it down, because I'm tempted to kind of go in here and add a little bit more lines, but then I don't want to. Maybe it's just a little bit darker, just like that. Okay, cool. And we're going to back off. I can probably add just a little bit more of a, just like that, just to show the tip there. Okay, I think I'm set there. Now this side, there's a lot more shadow that's going to be happening here. And what I'm going to try and pull off here is a little bit of dry brush in certain parts here. But the first part we're going to do is I am definitely going to ink this side heavier, darker, because I do want to indicate that it is more in shadow. This is where looking at your reference, especially for eyebrows, could be helpful. Again, I'm going to go darker here because I want to keep this side a bit darker. And let's see, put some kind of little shadow there of the eye. So that side's getting darker. There's a part where I want to add some shadow here, kind of like this part of the eye. So we're gonna go for it. All right, not bad, not bad. I do need to close that up there, make that dark. Okay, cool. And let's see. Before I tackle this side here, I'm gonna just kind of work a little bit on the mouth. And the reason for that is, again, I want to stay somewhat lighter with everything. I'm kind of honestly on the fence if I'm going to put this rim lighting here, reflective light. So what that's going to lead me to do first in this process is draw the mouth and see how that stands up just on its own. Meaning if what I've drawn with the mouth here ends up looking like it just makes the image just perfect, like it's perfect the way it is, meaning I won't try to add that extra bit of rim lighting here on the right side of her face, then I will leave it out, because I may find that, again, I like what I'm seeing with just the mouth and the lips in place. And of course the lips will be modeled with some shadow here on the right side. And then gotta draw the bottom part here. Kind of get that nice and tail head off, okay? And yeah, I may not want to put that there, because when I look at this, and again, I have somewhat of an advantage in recording this. Again, I mentioned there's a monitor straight just here's the drawing board, and the monitor is literally like 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet in front of me, and I gain another perspective of what the artwork looks like that sometimes you don't see as you're drawing it unless you kind of step away from the computer. And as you may, or maybe you don't know, having those different looks, being able to different ways to view your artwork is valuable, because you can then see it from a different perspective, which paints things in a different light, which informs how I may ink something just based on what I'm seeing. So that being said, let's just go ahead and ink in the rest of this lower part of her mouth here, of her lips. Again, she's kind of got some, just going to make this kind of little strokes here, just kind of, and we'll kind of leave it at that right there. Okay. Now I can see already from here that I do, at least on the monitor, I do kind of like, and I'm going to pull back here. Because essentially this is the view I have. I'm looking down at an angle, but this is a straight on view here for the most part. The board is at an angle. This is actually flush with the camera lens. So this whole time there's been a little bit of a distortion going down at an angle because the board tips down to my lap from the top of the table. So while the view on the camera from that perspective, the view on the monitor from that perspective doesn't make this like accurate, it does again point to a different way to view the artwork, a different angle. So that being said, whatever happens, I still need to resolve this side of her eyebrows. So I'm after looking at this, I am leaning now toward adding in the reflected light there, the rim lighting, the shadow, which is going to be some dry brushing. So let's see how this turns out. Again, we're going to start off with the right side here of her head, and so we'll just go in with this brush, kind of go into the side. Dry brushing is one of the things I started doing a lot when I first started inking with a brush, because I just so enjoyed the feeling of that brush gliding on the paper. And admittedly, having this smoother Strathmore paper is not impossible to dry brush on it with it, but at the same time, if you do have like a paper, I made a video fairly recent where I talked about having there's a brand of comic book blue line paper that has just a little more tooth to it. That's where dry brushing onto a surface that's got some tooth to it does have its advantage, because the tooth basically, if you imagine the paper not being perfectly smooth, that tooth allows for variety, for which the ink, when the brush goes over it, I should say, for a variety of what is smooth and what is, what is essentially, what am I trying to say? If the paper could be seen as like hills and valleys, the ink is going to be less likely to go into the valley, so that creates kind of a grayscale, not a grayscale, but kind of a halftone effect. And those are really cool. That's particularly cool when you're able to employ that as part of the dry brushing. So for right now, I'm just going to kind of leave it like this. The side of her face. I'm hesitant to go in toward the lip any closer, because that could just really create this weird break in the flow of the side of her face, and I don't want to do that. The only other place where I may add some dry brushing is probably going to be on her left, kind of like where her cheek is here, the left side of her face, and I don't want to overdo this either, but I'll add just a little bit, just like that. And gosh, are we done here? I think we kind of are. I think the only thing I really want to close off is the edge here of her lip here. Maybe just add just a little more shadow here, just like that. Again, we're not going to go overboard. Again, my mantra this time around with inking is if I'm not sure if I should put the ink down, I'm going to stay away from it and not put the ink in place, and then kind of leave it as is. And with that, there's a little bit of indication of something here that needs to be rendered. So we'll just put a couple of squiggles in there. Again, it's art. It's a skill. It's a skill. It's interpretation. It's not an exact science. It is. It's a craft that everyone, when you draw, paint, or ink, or whatever facet of art you call your own, you've got your own touch, and that's incredibly personal, obviously, and valuable, and that's what's important. So, I think with that being said, this page is done. So there we go. We're done. Complete with inking of this page. And although there's one area here that's, again, this is one of those things that when I look at it, kind of drives me, I was gonna say drives me crazy, but I see that I need to kind of complete this area right there and just maybe put one more little eyelash. And we'll just kind of carry that over. Just like that. So are we really done? I think I'm really done here. So let's just put the cap on the pen. And that is what we call finished, complete. So let's just kind of close in on here. See what we basically did with the face. Again, there's so much here that in the past I would have done. Like I was tempted to kind of render out this little bump in the nose, but as I look at it now, I'm like, let's just leave it open. Let's just leave it open. Leave it open, open, open. That's kind of, again, the thing I want to kind of drive home, at least. Maybe not to you, as you are your own artist if you're watching this, but just as my own kind of my thought process here as far as kind of changing things up a little bit in my approach. So we leave it open. We used to say, I guess back in the day, leave it open for color. But at the same time, I think kind of leaving it open just to let the artwork sit. And I could wake up tomorrow morning and take a look at this and say, hey, I need to add this, or I need to white this out. That's a very, very real possibility to say, hey, I need to white out something here. I need to fix something on this piece. Hopefully this is in focus. I'm trying to get this to focus here. Focus, focus. There we go. We got green. Okay, good. So yeah, I'm just kind of taking a look at what I did here. Of course, the face is kind of like that payoff, right? So I'm very interested in just really kind of looking at it. How close can we go? The green. So there we go. It ain't perfect. There's already things I'm seeing that like I could have. You could always do things differently. You could always make things better, but every page is important as part of the learning process. But at the same time, I'm making a comic book here. And so that's my ultimate goal. So there's the completed splash page, opening page for the Sky Dreamers. Okay, thanks for watching. More to come if you like this video. I know this was a long video. This is long format. I guess I can divvy it up and then make some shorter posts, as is the popular thing to do. But again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, maybe subscribe. If you want to leave a comment as well, that'd be awesome. As always, more to come. Thanks again for watching. Catch you in another video.